Welcome to Inside Magazine. I'm David Matlin. The story we bring you today proves once again that there's a reality beyond imagination. Avraham Sinai is an Orthodox Israeli Jew who lives in Tzfat in northern Israel. If you pass him on the street, you'd never imagine what lies behind his typical ultra-Orthodox appearance. He prays in the synagogue, studies Torah, eats kosher, and observes the commandments. But in another incarnation, Avraham Sinai was linked, almost unbelievably, to Hezbollah. For many years was known as Ibrahim and lived in southern Lebanon as a militant poised to fight against Israel. Now Rabbi, formerly Hezbollah militiaman. A report by Ilon Miles.
One's missing here.
It's the afternoon of the fast of Gedalia in the ultra-Orthodox Sinai family household in Tzfat, and Avraham's daughters are already setting the table for the meal that ends the fast. No detail in the setting here gives even the slightest hint of the story of the father who began life so far from where he now is.
Where's Chaim? Isn't he coming? Moran?
Other than his residual accent. Avraham, are you working on your accent?
No, I feel fine. Okay, yes, I feel fine.
Is there anything in this house that reminds you of the house you grew up in, that you were born in?
Let's say that for the festival, I always slaughter here. I bring a sheep. Yes, and a ritual slaughterer. I bring someone here, arrange it all. That's also what we did in Lebanon. Over there, what we can see, Kfar Kila, Marjayun, Kaliya, El Hiyam. If you look far into the distance, there are two mountains really far over there. That's where I grew up.
From a sufficiently high observation point on the northern border, and on a clear day, Avraham Sinai can identify critical locations in his life spread out before him.
I frequently passed through that place over there on foot or by car. I moved about freely there.
About 50 kilometers and a deep abyss separate this religiously observant Jew from the infant born in the Lebanon Valley 40 years ago as a Shiite Muslim named Ibrahim Yassin. Do you miss that place?
In truth, no. We relate to it as a kind of trauma. I was traumatized by that place.
The seeds of hatred and revenge, which would eventually lead to a complete change of identity, were sown back then as young Ibrahim grew up in the conflict between the Shiite minority and the Sunni Palestinian refugees.
The Palestinians punished us a lot. They trampled on us. They broke us. They took my father, my brother. They'd catch me in the forest and hit me for no reason.
When Israel's IDF entered Lebanon in 1982, Ibrahim was already 18, married, and awaiting his first child. Like others, he also viewed the Israeli forces as saviors, but unlike others for whom tossing rice on the tank convoys was enough.
The truth is, for me, I really connected with the Israelis. I was thinking of my own good. If they're coming to help me out, then I desist for my own good, because they were willing to be there for me.
How did the initial contact come about?
The first contact was through my wife about to give birth in the village, and we needed help. So we stopped a military convoy, and the Israeli soldier got out of his vehicle and began helping my wife with the birth. He called in a helicopter to bring a nurse to the village and a doctor, and we just connected. We connected, and I was so happy that I could be with him. It's not that he wanted contact with me. No, I wanted the connection with him. It's the other way around. If I knew where terrorists were, if I saw terrorists, I'd quickly go to tell him, because those terrorists, listen, they were killing us before you came. They were against us before you came. So I was happy and ran to tell him. I was really pleased someone was there to protect us. I'd come to their base and report everything, work with them. I brought details on everything I saw. I started to gain the Israelis' respect, too.
Why? Did they pay you better?
They didn't pay at all. They didn't pay anything, not at all. On the contrary, I looked at it as though I should pay them. Why? Listen, they were doing the work for me, catching terrorists, so I felt like I should be paying them.
This careful balance of forces was broken by a third factor, the fundamentalist Shiite militia, Hezbollah, which was just beginning to surface. But it was not long before Ibrahim was kidnapped by its soldiers and imprisoned for treason.
Hezbollah came and ambushed us in our own home. Hands up, an ambush in our home. Me, my father, and 2 others, citizens. We were there in the village, working, farming. They put us in twos into crates and ejected us with sedatives. I opened my eyes when the sedative wore off, and I'm in an underground bunker, 2 meters by 1.5 meters. Listen, they beat me like crazy. No part of my body wasn't in pain. I was completely swollen. They returned me to the bunker. I'm a lump of flesh. They punish me every single day with electric shocks, beatings. They pour hot water on you, then cold water. They stand on you under a kind of barrel. I was blindfolded every single day, and I faint. I faint from the beatings, as though from the moment I faint, I'm dead. So they pour water on you to rouse you, just to beat you again.
But Ibrahim doesn't tell his captors what he knows, realizing that, one way or another, he's destined for death. For him, the family's honor is more important than his own life. After several months of this torture, his interrogator makes one last attempt.
He starts speaking, talking as though he and I were friends. He says, "What did the Israelis do to you? Do you think the Israelis care if I kill you? Why should the Israelis care if I die?" Just then, one of the terrorists brings my child in.
Your son? How old was he?
9 months. 9 months. It's to show me, here, we've brought you your family. It's like a sign. Look, your child's here. I want to get closer to my son, but the terrorists say, not yet. If you'll be decent about things, I'll be decent towards you. Really, I wanted to talk. I wanted to reveal everything. Who I knew, who goes to the Israelis, who works with them, how the meetings go. I wanted to tell it all. He never let me finish my sentence. I'm hit hard on the head. It splits my head open. I'm hovering between fainting, not fainting, between seeing, not seeing, and suddenly in that instant, a terrorist approaches my baby, pours kerosene over him, and burns him in front of me, to death. This...
Are these photos from your arrival?
Yes.
If divine intervention exists, it was the first time Ibrahim encountered it, escaping death by his captors and released as part of a sulha, reconciliation deal organized by his relatives with Hezbollah operatives. He went from being a traitor to a top Hezbollah soldier as an intelligence officer, collecting real-time information, except that in this officer, a flame still burned.
I wanted revenge against Hezbollah, against them and the Palestinians and everyone who had harmed us. I wanted vengeance. At some point, I invited one of our family relatives, my father's cousin, and brought his friends to us, to our home. We put on a big spread, and from one thing to another, they start talking about a terror action against the Israeli military base near our village. I was excited. The Israeli guy that I loved and did so much to help us now, well, if I tell him, he'll be so pleased. So I was excited. Excited, an opportunity. I know of every single Hezbollah cell, where each one trains, which vehicles they use, where the missiles are kept. I get up and start running. I meet the soldiers, and he kisses me and cries. He says, "Didn't you see how they burned your child? Do you want to get your whole family burned? Why'd you come here?"
Ibrahim is with the Israelis once more. Not just a regular agent, but one of the best.
Now the Israelis were paying.
Did they pay well?
They paid whatever I asked.
If it were possible to talk about all of Abraham's exploits, they would probably make for an entire series of action movies.
Do you know how many soldiers I saved from death? How many terror attacks I prevented? No one could harm us and remain alive. When asked, there was no one I couldn't reach.
At the close of the 1990s, senior Hezbollah members began suspecting Ibrahim, who felt the earth burning beneath him again. Israel granted him refugee status, settling his family in Sfat. Are people here familiar with your story?
Of course they are.
Here in the streets of a Hasidic community, a new journey begins, one that starts with a dream from his days across the border.
After Hezbollah imprisoned me in that bunker, I turned to God and asked, "Why are you keeping watch over me?" I realized someone was guarding me. I understood that. When I fell asleep at night, I had a dream. I entered an ancient house, like this one you see here. There were 3 rabbis in the house, a library to the right of the door, and I take a book from the bookshelf and tell my wife, "This is the book we're looking for." When I get up in the morning and tell my wife the dream, she asks, "Where is this place?" I say, "Maybe because we're working with the Israelis, in the next world we'll be judged favorably by the Jews' rabbis." 3 years later, I entered the rabbinate. Then I say to my wife, "Remember back then, do you remember the dream I told you about in Lebanon 5 years ago?" She says, "Okay, so?" "Look," I say, "this is the house that God wants us to reach. This is the way." I go in and I'm familiar with everything. Rabbi Shmuel Eliyahu, the chief rabbi of Safed, may God watch over him, is familiar from my dream. It's that very man receiving us.
When was the first time you felt Jewish?
Once I got here, I felt that I'd become completely Jewish.
Why?
It's a feeling.
You could have just been Israeli.
True.
Like all your other friends.
That's true. I didn't study in order to become Jewish because I believed that I was Jewish. I felt Jewish. We were married here too. This is where I married a second time. I separated from my wife for 3 months and then we held our Jewish wedding.
Do you feel that you belong here?
Absolutely I belong, and how?
Outwardly, not much remains in Avraham Sinai, the Jewish Israeli of Ibrahim Yassin, the Lebanese Muslim whose daughters understand very little of his mother tongue. Do you know a little Arabic? No? Do you understand Arabic? What your parents are saying when they talk to each other?
Only my oldest son knows a little. He knows Arabic. He came from Lebanon, aged around 13 or so.
But one thing that the clothes, the wall ornaments, and the passing time will probably never completely erase is the fear of those across the border, those who made the mistake of leaving him alive. Does returning there to see how things are now ever pique your interest?
Listen, let me tell you, even if the day comes when they say there's peace, I'll count to 10 slowly before I'll consider stepping on that soil. Understand?
Avraham Sinai was here in our studio just a few weeks ago, and we asked him about the jihadist extremists who claim to act as Muslims and who reference the Quran. He spoke of his hopes for peace in the region.
I worked for the benefit of the State of Israel in the early 80s, the First Lebanon War, but in my life I never thought that I am a traitor to my religion, to my nation, to my family. Yes, I worked with the Israelis. I ran without my shoes in front of the Israeli military. And the Israeli army came. It was like the Messiah arrived. He came to save us. So obviously I went with the Israelis and I went with the military, but I went them a lot. Hezbollah and the Palestinians as well. First of all, by the Palestinians. After 82, 85, the Hezbollah caught me and they hang me on my hands in the air and they actually scraped the flesh off my body.
Do you have any...
They burnt a child in front of my eyes, 9 months old. That's not torture. My wife came to visit me and he did like that with his gun and he hit her over the head and started kicking her with her feet. I also grew up in a Muslim family in Lebanon. The most important thing for us is the women, the wife. The moment you see somebody, and I said, okay, cut me, I don't know, throw me to the dogs, that's okay, but you know, that's okay. But to start kicking my wife, no matter where in her body, and to throw her to the ground in front of her husband, I think that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's above everything else. That goes above anything else. That's the highest rank of the humiliation of a human being.
Thank you for joining us on this journey today at Inside Magazine here at I-24 News. I'm David Matley.